Hey there everyone, Bob here, and welcome back to Gamer Nutrition. So in this video, I want to talk about the thyroid. I want to talk about how important it is, some of the things I've discovered about mine, and just approaches, change, some differences that I'm going to do with mine going forward. So in the description down below, before we start, actually before I even go there, I am not a doctor, do not take medical advice from me. Talk to your own medical doctor for anything going on here. I can just give you what it is I've learned and how I'm changing my approach to my thyroid going forward. Down in the description below, 2 videos, maybe 3 videos. Two of them are very long. One's like an hour and 10 minutes. The other one's like 2 hours and 10 minutes that really go in depth into the thyroid and a lot of what I'm going to cover well beyond what I'm going to say. There's some caveats with both these videos. In the one video, the guy is clearly trying to sell you something. He has his own line of nutritional supplements and all this other stuff that he wants you to buy into. Similar with Dr. Berg and what I said in the first or second video I made, just because he's trying to sell you his own supplements doesn't mean what he's saying is wrong. It could be that he actually believes his supplements are the best, but you got to take it with a grain of salt. You got to do some extra research, really find out what it is, and so forth. The other guy concerns me as an anti-vacciners. And an anti-vaxxer, he's going to talk in the video about how the vaccines we take as kids can block the thyroid, keep the thyroid from working, and it can create this false positive of a bad thyroid. And maybe what he says is 100% true, and maybe vaccines do cause this problem. Here's what I know though. I don't have polio today. And if I didn't receive a polio vaccine, maybe I would. Maybe not, but maybe I would. I'd rather have a bad thyroid, something that I potentially can heal and correct, than polio, something I can't. I didn't die of smallpox. There's a lot of things. It's easy to say, these vaccines are causing all these massive problems, but you got to compare what the vaccine's preventing compared to the possible problem it's creating. So maybe what he's saying is true. Maybe the thyroid does have problems with these vaccines. I'll still take not having polio. Okay, so those are the 2 videos. If you think you have a thyroid problem or you have a thyroid problem, I would definitely recommend giving them a watch. They've completely changed how I knew and understand my thyroid. And I've been dealing with a thyroid problem since I was about 10 years old. In fact, let's go ahead and I'll just run down my history with my thyroid. So when I was 10 or 12 years old, I started getting these weird headaches where I don't even know if headache was the right term, but it was like my body felt like it was running sluggishly. Like everything else, I couldn't keep up. My mind wouldn't keep up. Time was moving faster than I was moving. I called them fast forward headaches. I didn't know how to describe them. They just were really, really bad. And it ended up causing me to break my arm. We were doing some work. We were collecting up some firewood, and I got one of these headaches going on and getting yelled at, work faster, and trying to throw lumber and everything. And I ended up falling off the back of a truck, which was it was a tall truck, 2.5, 3 feet off the ground. I fell and broke my arm. And they ended up finally doing some blood work, and they found out that I had a hypoactive thyroid, meaning my T3 and T4 levels were low in my blood. So T3 and T4 are hormones produced by the thyroid. So it's thyroid hormone 3-iodine for T3, thyroid hormone 4-iodine for T4. And these T3 and T4s are basically the driving fuel, the driving mechanism behind your entire metabolic system. They're used by all your different cells. They tell your cells to bring in either sugars or ketones to convert for energy. They're the control, not circuit, but control signals for the body in order to regulate the energy use and all of these type things. They're super important for your metabolism. So my T3, T4s were low, hypoactive, low thyroid. They put me on synthetic medication. So it was Synthroid or levothyroxine. The levothyroxine is just the generic version of Synthroid, but it's essentially synthetic T3, T4 hormone. So they would take your blood work and they look and be like, all right, your T4, T3 levels are supposed to be here, you're here, so we're going to give you this much prescription synthetic in order to balance you all out. Sounds perfectly fine. And that was kind of the way I knew it as a kid. It was, your thyroid doesn't work, you take this and it makes everything work. Yay, go team doctors. So that's kind of my story. And that, like I said, that happened when I was about 10 or 12 years old. I'm now 35. I've been taking it forever. As of today, I take 225 milligrams of Synthroid or levothyroxine, the synthetic stuff, which is an extremely high amount. Most people take 75 to 150 milligrams. So I'm about double the average person in terms of prescription. I don't know why that's important. I just find it funny that mine's so high. In fact, there's been doctors that are like, that doesn't seem right. That when I first moved to my current doctor, he told me to stop taking it and do blood work because he felt it was just way too high. It shouldn't have been that much. Oh wait, that was the right amount. Start taking it again. I also learned, so let's go to what these videos talk about down below, and some of the things I've learned. So the first thing that really stood out to me was both of these doctors said that thyroids don't ever really go bad. It's unbelievably rare for thyroids to go bad. What normally happens is your thyroid works within this closed loop system. So the thyroid takes in iodine, and it uses selenium with that iodine to create the T3 and T4 hormones. And it produces roughly 85% of what it produces is T4, roughly 15% of what it produces is T3. The reason we distinguish between the two of them is T4 is the majority of the blood, it's in the most of it. T3 though is 4 times more powerful. So in times of where your body's using up a lot of energy during a workout, post-workout or whatever, you need more T3 because the T3 is 4 times more efficient than the T4 is. But the thyroid can't really adjust how much it produces. Well, it can't really adjust the ratio that it produces. It always produces roughly 85-15, but it can change how much it's producing, right? If that makes sense. So that's what the thyroid produces is T4, T3. Your liver, or we'll actually skip the liver, we'll go to the pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland monitors the blood. And what it does is if your T4 and T3 are both low, it releases something called thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. The TSH goes up to the thyroid where there's some receptors. The TSH meets with the thyroid. The receptors pick this up. It stimulates the hormone, or stimulates the thyroid, causing it to produce more. So if T4, T3 are high or low, you get more TSH. Thyroid produces more T4, T3. If your T3, T4 are high, the pituitary gland reads that, produces less TSH, the thyroid produces less on its own to kind of regulate everything out. Now, if the ratio of T4 to T3 are off, say your T3 level is low because your body's been using a bunch of T3, you've been doing a bunch of exercise, well then the pituitary gland tells the liver to go ahead and convert T4s to T3s. See, the liver, the stomach, the gut, the intestine, all of these can actually do it, but the liver does roughly 60% of it. Through the use of bile salts, can not lop off one of those T4 atoms. Or I'm sorry, not T4 atoms, but one of the iodine atoms. So it takes in a T4, removes one iodine, now you have a T3. So if you're low on T3 levels, liver brings it in, converts T4 over to T3, brings your T3 levels back up to where they're supposed to be. If your T3 levels are high, your T4 levels are low, the pituitary gland tells the liver to stop, and then since your thyroid's producing 85 to 15, eventually your T4 levels will come back up. So you get this kind of closed loop circuit. The thyroid produces T3, T4, the liver go ahead and based off of the pituitary gland either converts more or less T4 into T3, the pituitary gland watches it, if the level's low or level's high, produces TSH back up to the thyroid for everything. So that's kind of the basic breakdown of how this all works. Hopefully that makes sense. They explain it better in their videos. So when you start taking this synthetic hormone, or what I've learned is the big takeaway was I learned that generally people don't have thyroid problems until 25, 30. The fact that I had one at 10, 11, 12 years old was super rare. I also learned that thyroid doesn't ever actually tend to go bad. What tends to go bad is somewhere in that feedback loop, something gets screwed up. Either the pituitary gland isn't producing TSH when it should, or it's not reading the blood like it should, or the liver's not converting T4 to T3 like it should. One of these things tends to actually go wrong. It's not normally actually the thyroid itself. I also learned then that part of what can happen is there's receptors on the thyroid. There's little receptor arms that stick out, and what they're doing is they're designed to look for that TSH hormone coming up from the pituitary gland. Well, there's also a bunch of different things that can go there, and there's only so many of these receptors on the thyroid. And what can happen is other hormones or whatever can end up interacting with that and taking up those spots that the TSH is supposed to go to. So the thyroid could just be waiting for TSH. The TSH levels could be really high in the blood, but they're not getting to the thyroid because the thyroid just doesn't have an open receptors for it. And this is, I think, how my blood work looked. My blood work, when you look at it, my TSH levels are high, my T4 and T3 levels are low. So this could mean the thyroid's just not creating what it's supposed to. That's absolutely a possibility, but apparently a very little possibility. The other possibility is there's something else blocking those receptors on the thyroid. And then they talked about some of the common blocks. And I looked at what was going on in my life when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I don't remember exactly when this all went down. And there were a bunch of big alarms that went off in my head. So the first one that can cause it is, the first one that jumped out to me was stress hormones and endorphins and endorphins. I think they're endorphins. Hormones caused by stress. They're caused by your adrenal glands. They produce these endorphins, which go out, and some of these can be attracted to the receptor on the thyroid gland, and they'll take it up. The higher your endorphins, the more stress your adrenal glands, the more of them are going to block your thyroid, the worse your thyroid's going to run just because it can't get the TSH. Now, I've never been a stressed person. And by stress, I mean mentally stressed. I've never been someone that worries about things that are out of my control, especially since I was in the Army. That was one thing, like, the Army did really good. If you have no control over something, there's no point in worrying about it. I don't worry about terrorists. I don't worry about getting into car accidents. I don't worry about hurricanes coming. There's nothing I can do about these things. They're out of my hands. I take them as they go. I'm actually a very low stress person with that. But there's other types of stresses that happen in your life. If you, say, have a really bad infection, that creates body stress within you, which is going to raise your endorphins. If you, say, have a broken arm, broken leg, whatever, that pain level will raise your stress. That will raise your endorphins. If you have cancer of some sort, that's going to raise your endorphins. All of these things are internal body stresses. Another one can be not getting proper rest. And this was the ding, 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 ding for me. Since I was 10, 11, 12 years old, I've had horrible sleep. I was one of those ones where people would hear me snoring 2-3 doors over. And they wouldn't even describe it as snoring. They would say, it sounds like you stop breathing and then you kind of cough. And that one real big inhale is really loud, and we'd hear it. So they would hear nothing from me for like 45 seconds and then this, and then nothing from me for 45 seconds and so on. It was sleep apnea. Never got it diagnosed, never looked at it, but it was sleep apnea. And I've had this from about the age of 10, maybe even younger, up to about 29 years old. When I was finally 29 years old, I'm like, all right, I got to go to the doctor, get this checked out. I went, the doctor was like, dude, what the hell is your problem? You're an idiot. They did the test, which is where they put you down into a bed and they hook up all this EKG shit up over you, and they watch your Eucadian cycle, your breathing cycle and everything. And I was waking up roughly twice a minute. I woke up like 109, 110 times in 1 hour. I was never getting anywhere near a REM sleep cycle. And this was definitely when I was 29 years old. I was way overweight, even much worse than I am now. That was when I was getting close to like my absolute worst. But this was something even when I was in the Army. So I was 21 years old, 6 feet tall, 195 pounds, in good shape. I still remember having roommates that had real problems. They couldn't sleep in the same room as me because I snored so bad. And it was all of this. So from the age of like 10 till 29, I had a huge stress in my body, and my body was never getting proper rest. Started right around when my thyroid went to shit. So there's number one. Number two, I grew up in a community with well water. It was we all had plumbing to our houses, but it was all from like 6 different wells around our community that pumped to us. There was no fluoride in the water. When I was about 10, maybe 8 years old, they found out that I had some real issues with my teeth because I wasn't getting fluoride on them. And I'm pretty sure, I have to confirm this, I have to tell my mom, I don't really remember, but I'm pretty sure for some time they put me on some special toothpaste and stuff with excess fluoride in it in order to help my teeth out. Well, one of the issues with fluoride apparently is when you get too much of it in your blood, it will go to that receptor on the thyroid, block it, and then you can't get that in. So I was high on endorphins, high on fluoride, blocking it. I also, my diet, I think probably had very, very little iodine. I don't know if it was not enough to properly do what it needs to do, but I think it was probably quite low. There was really no seafood in my house. My dad ate seafood occasionally, but I did not like seafood as a kid growing up. I still don't really like fish. I like crustaceans. Is that where I'm looking for? Crab, lobster, all that stuff. But just straight fish, I'm not a big fan of. So I might not have had enough iodine for my thyroid in order to create T4 and T3. You can't create a thyroid hormone plus 3 iodine plus 4 iodine if you don't have the iodine. You also can't be stimulated to do it with all these other things being mixed up. So when I read all of this or watched all of this, it kind of really set off an alarm. Like, holy shit, this all makes sense. It adds up. When I directly look at my history of when my thyroid screwed up, boom, 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 everything is acting up. And then I jump ahead to 29, 30 years old. I'm trying to get healthy, really focusing on, I have the CPAP now. I'm getting really good sleep. I'm feeling much better in terms of that. But I'm also taking this synthetic Synthroid. I'm taking the synthetic T3, T4. Well, part of what the pituitary gland does is it monitors the T3 and T4 in your bloodstream. And if there's enough of it in there, it doesn't release TSH. So my thyroid, in theory, could be perfectly fine and working. But as long as I keep taking in this T3, T4 every single day and keep my T3, T4 levels up, the pituitary gland is never going to release that TSH. We're never going to check. Well, a lot of people are, okay, so what's the problem with that? Maybe you stop taking the prescription, that's great, but at least you're getting the T3, T4 that you need. Well, the problem comes in that exacerbates it is the prescription can't react to changes in the body, right? Right now, I'm losing roughly 1 pound every 4 days, which means I'm losing quite a few cells out of my body every 4 days. As my cells, the number of cells go down, the amount of T3 and T4 in order to drive those cells is going to decrease. Well, the prescription doesn't auto-regulate. It doesn't auto-balance out. It's 225 milligrams. I go get blood work. They'll look at the number. If it's good or bad, all right, we lower it down. But you do that maybe twice a year. It takes like 6 months, or it's not 6 months, 6 weeks for the changes to actually take effect. So we go in and say, oh, all right, your T4 and T3 are a little high. Let's take it down to 200 milligrams. Well, 6 weeks later, they go back in, oh, you're still a little high, so let's take it down to 175 milligrams. They keep adjusting it, but it's a very slow process. It's not, it does that, the whole point of that feedback circuit is it allows it to adjust on the fly as your body changes, as you grow older, all these different things can go on. It's all balanced out within it. And I'm using my hands a lot. Should stop that. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm at the point where I got to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I've shown these off a bunch of times now in the previous video. Thyroid support, don't worry about what it's called. This is primarily iodine and selenium. So the selenium is also used in the thyroid. So is it a mineral? I think selenium is a mineral. No, it's an amino acid. So selenium is the amino acid used in the thyroid to combine together with the iodine in order to make the T3, T4. Now, what I found was when I was trying to I found it was real easy to find some really good healthy iodine that I was going to take, but it was tougher to find just pure selenium. And then this one here, since it was selenium plus the iodine in the right amounts, I went ahead and just picked this up so it's one pill rather than 2 different ones. So we got that. Then I've also added in the ox bile here. And don't worry about the specific ones, just find ones that look good to you. I went for ones that were ideally about as hormone-free as possible because apparently the hormones have been screwing up my thyroid. But the ox bile also helps convert that T4 to T3. It's also helping with the ketosis and all of that stuff. So I've added those into my diet. Now what I got to do though is I got to lower my levothyroxine, my prescription medicine, and see if my thyroid compensates. See if my thyroid starts seeing the pituitary gland creates TSH, my thyroid starts to come back up and compensate. If it does that, well, then I continue to lower the prescription medication and see if the thyroid just is working fine and all that. But it's going to take some really, really long time. But as long as this is going on, my metabolism should be picking back up. Things should be good. Since I started taking both of these, I felt so much better. That was tied. I talked about this in my 1 month update video. Putting those two into my diet, headaches and energy. Headaches were gone instantly. Energy was up the very next day. Within 48 hours, I was like, yay, I feel good. And that's great. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of if you're someone like me that has had a thyroid problem and you kind of just accepted the way that it was told to you by the doctors, that it is, you take synthetic hormone for the rest of your life, there's nothing you can do about it, it's perfectly fine, you take your 3T4, that might not be true. Check these other videos out. There's some important information out there that may or may not be true also, but it's at least worth looking into. Look at your situation, see if any of those bells and whistles go off like it did for me. There's some real possibility that they're treating the symptoms, but they're not treating the cause, is what I think has happened with me. That's what I think. They corrected the symptom, but they didn't treat the cause, if that makes sense. And I'm really hoping that within 6 months, maybe I can stop taking Synthroid altogether. As long as I keep some iodine in, keep everything else under control, I might be pretty good to go. That was a long one, guys. I realized there was a lot of rambling. There's a lot of different parts when you bring it all together with how the different glands work together and all of that. It's complicated. Check the longer videos out. If you have any questions, I'll try and break it down a little bit more. Let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, thanks for watching.